So where's the tripwire? I'm Michael Smerconish in Philadelphia. What would it take for NATO and the U.S. to actually be at war with Russia? Or are we already there? I ask the question because of the hair splitting that went on this week regarding Poland's supply of MiG-29 fighter jets. Poland surprised American officials by offering to turn over its aging Russian-made MiG fighters to Ukraine. But America balked when Poland wanted to transfer them through the U.S. and NATO and then have their fleet replaced with American-made fighter jets. The U.S. said the move could be considered, quote, escalatory and trigger a significant Russian reaction. My question, why would that make any difference in how Russia views the transfer of those planes? As the New York Times put it, in the midst of a remarkably unified alliance, the back and forth was a reminder that the joint effort to punish and ultimately repel Russia has a third rail that no one wants to touch. The Wall Street Journal said this: the bigger problem is the message this fiasco sends to Mr. Putin about NATO by so ostentatiously not sending the fighters and saying the reason is fear of escalation. Mr. Biden is telling the Russian what he doesn't have to worry about. It all reminded me of the elaborate workaround the United States devised when trying to adhere to the Neutrality Act during World War II before the United States was bombed at Pearl Harbor. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill sought to buy fighter planes from the United States. FDR asked England to send an aircraft carrier to pick them up. But England was short on aircraft carriers and asked instead for them to be delivered to its ally, Canada. The U.S. military personnel flying the planes to Canada would have broken the Neutrality Act. So here's what happened. The United States flew them to the border, drained them of fuel, and horses and trucks were then used to transport them the few hundred yards across the border where they were then refueled. That may then have followed the letter of the law, but it made pretty clear which side the U.S. would be supporting. Of course, 2 years later, Japan ended the Neutrality Act by bombing Pearl Harbor. In the current battle for Ukraine, American support has been even more extensive and expensive. By the end of February, the Biden administration had already given $1 billion in aid, including Javelin missiles, command launch units, and patrol boats. And the new appropriations bill passed by Congress allocates another $13.6 billion, including more than $10 billion of direct or indirect military-related aid. On top of the sanctions that Putin has already labeled an economic war, can the United States really think such moves are themselves not escalatory and won't provoke reaction from Vladimir Putin? Yesterday, a bipartisan group of 15 House members wrote to the president and asked the administration to step up its support, including supplying surface-to-air missile systems and facilitating the transfer of those fighter jets. 40 Republicans in the Senate said pretty much the same thing. President Biden on this topic said this yesterday.
The idea that we're going to send in offensive equipment and have planes and tanks and trains going in with American pilots and American crews, just understand, and don't kid yourself, no matter what you all say, that's called World War III, okay?
Still, why can the United States deliver millions and billions to be used for weapons, but still claim it's not directly involved? It all leads me to this week's survey question at Smerconish.com. Should President Biden aid the transfer of aircraft and air defense systems to Ukraine? Joining me now to discuss is retired Navy Admiral James Stavridis, who spent 4 years as the Supreme Allied Commander at NATO. He's written an all-too-relevant work of fiction just out called 2034, A Novel of the Next World War. Admiral, good morning. You have a Ph.D. in international law. You were the dean of a graduate school of international law and diplomacy. You're the perfect person for me to ask, what exactly is provocation in this context?
Well, let's start with ground truth in international law here, which is Putin is the one provoking. Putin is the one invading. Putin is the one flagrantly violating international law. He hasn't declared war on Ukraine. He simply invaded it. And he's throwing gasoline on a bonfire of war crimes by now purporting to bring Syrian volunteers to the battlefield. So, Michael, we got to start by saying the serial violator of international law here is Vladimir Putin. Having said that, okay, let's go over to our side of the coin here with the democracies. What can we do? And I think the false discussion here is that it's kind of an on and off switch. In other words, we just keep the switch off and we watch what happens in horror, or we flip the switch on and we send troops in, we put our jets over Ukraine. Neither of those answers are right. It's a rheostat, right? Like in your dining room, you kind of turn up the light. So what we're doing, in my mind, is about right, which is massive additions of military assistance. It is huge sanctions, and it is supplying very lethal but defensive weapons. We're not giving Ukraine anything that they could use to invade Russia. We're giving them the systems they need to attack Russians who are invading them. I think we're in the right place.
Okay, so in my house, if it were the thermostat, not the rheostat, I'd be the one turning it on and my wife would come along and then completely shut it off. Has Vladimir Putin completely shut it off? In other words, have you considered that he has, through back-channel communications, served notice? If you transfer those MiG fighters, that's it. It's game on with NATO.
I doubt it for a couple of reasons. First of all, he would not want to lay out a bold red line like that, and nor should we, by the way. I think we should stop saying we'll never do this, we'll never do that. We should say things like, at this time, we're not going to, etc. Point two here would be he doesn't want to take on a conventional fight with NATO. He doesn't want a nuclear fight either. You know, he's got family. He loves his country. He's not going to reach for the apocalypse button. And he doesn't want a conventional fight with NATO because we outnumber him massively. There's this kind of misconception that somehow the Russian armed forces are comparable to NATO armed forces. Couldn't be further from the truth. We outspend them 15-1. We have a 5-1 advantage in troops, a 5-1 advantage in combat aircraft. You get the idea. So I think Putin is rattling that nuclear saber, hoping we will simply back down. And we just can't do that. We have to continue our course of action. The one thing you mentioned up front, the MiG-29s, I can see both sides of that conversation. But in my view, give them to the Ukrainians, figure out the logistics, put Ukrainian insignia on them, have Ukrainians fly them. I think it's a huge morale boost, and I think it also would have impact on the battlefield. It's a hard logistics problem, but we shouldn't back down and be scared of our shadow in terms of Vladimir Putin.
So my survey question today is asking our viewers, should the president aid the transfer of aircraft and air defense systems in Ukraine? Admiral Stavridis says yes.
I do. And I'll make a small caveat, which you didn't clarify in the question. I would not put U.S. pilots flying those aircraft that you refer to. And part of the reason there, Michael, is not only the international law, but it's also who's up there in the cockpit. You know, that's not Madeleine Albright up there, former Secretary of State, you know, kind of figuring out all the back and forth. That's Goose and Maverick. And so same thing on the Russian side. So the potential for an incident between nuclear armed powers is pretty high. Let the Ukrainians
That's implied, by the way,
zone.
Admiral, that's implied. That is implied in my survey question. I do not intend to suggest that they would be American pilots.
Gotcha.
Hey, you spoke to the Russian military capability. Yesterday, put this up, Catherine, the Washington Post said the following. 2 weeks after Russian forces streamed into neighboring Ukraine following months of buildup, evidence is mounting that the invasion has not gone to plan and that Russia's much vaunted military may not be that formidable force that we once feared. That doesn't mean Russia won't ultimately seize Kyiv and topple the Ukrainian government. And it doesn't mean Ukraine won't pay a horrific price in both military and civilian casualties as it continues to do so daily. But the stumbling pace of Russia's assault since Vladimir Putin ordered troops into Ukraine late last month, marked by apparent confusion among commanders and viral images of downed Russian planes and tanks set alight, has reset expectations for how the conflict will unfold. Are you surprised by the Russian capabilities thus far?
I am not shocked at their failures. I think that they have improved over the force that I surveyed as the Supreme Allied Commander some years ago, but they still have three key faults that are on display here. One is they still have a high percentage of conscripts, reservists that they're putting into the fight. They're inexperienced, they're afraid, they seem very almost disoriented. Secondly, logistics. This has always been a shortfall for Russia. Logistics are hard. Professional militaries really do logistics well. We do that well. Russia's failing to get that forward. And third and finally, Michael, the generalship here, the admiralship, has not been very good. The battle plan isn't good. There's a lot of confusion. And all three of those are weaknesses we've seen in Russia historically. I think Vladimir Putin was told, we corrected those, boss. Turns out, not so much.